So finally I am back with a new video about the Old Norse gods. This time we are going to talk about the god Loki, or Loke as I would say in Swedish. Before we get into that, though, I want to say a huge thank you to my faithful Patreons as well as all my subscribers, old as well as new. Thank you so much for sticking with me despite my random posting of videos and sometimes long pauses. And do leave a comment. It is always fun to hear your thoughts about what you think I should do in my next video. So, Loki has a special position within the Old Norse gods, because he is not just a god, he is also a giant. His father is the giant Farbaute, and his mother is called either Laufey or Nal. Here is where there are two different theories around his mother based on her name. Is she a giantess as well, or is she one of the gods? Nobody can say for sure, but it is an interesting thought if she actually were a goddess, because there are many male gods that have been marrying female giantess, and their children does not seem to be viewed as giants, they seem to be viewed as gods. So if Laufey is a goddess and she married a giant, that can, according to some theories, say something about how the Vikings viewed relationships based on mother or father. The theory is that it was okay for men to marry women from lower status, because a woman's identity when she was married blended into the identity of the man. So by marrying a man from a higher social status, she gained status. But a woman could never marry a man from a lower status without losing her own status, since she lost a part of her identity as a married woman. I want to say here that while there are some signs towards this, if you read Icelandic sagas, this theory might also be a bit colored by our own patriarchy thinking. Because we also know that if the mother was more known and was considered more important than the father, instead of claiming a surname including your father's name, like Thorsson, you would claim your surname after your mother, Åsa's son. So she didn't lose her identity totally. At least not all women did. We also know that according to old laws, inheritance in form of land and money was from both sides of the family. Inheritance was always directly given to any children, and as long as the man had acknowledged the child as his, even though the child was born outside of the marriage by so-called frillor, official lovers, these children were included in the inheritance. While they might not have the right to land or house, they were given the right to some of the money. If there were no children to the deceased, their other closest family on their side got the land and money. This meant that a wife or a husband did never inherit anything from their spouse in case their spouse died. It also meant that in case of a divorce, both parts took with them what they from the beginning brought into the marriage. Again, this does not point towards the women losing their identity just because they married. This is not about the Viking relationship to mother and father, this is about Loki. But Loki is, however, one where the family ties and bonds is more important than perhaps any other god or goddesses. He is connected strongly to Odin by being his sworn foster brother. Now, blood brothers, or sworn brothers, or foster brothers, as you also call them, is in the Viking Age something that is not just similar to adopting a child because they can't stay with their own parents. The Swedish name for it is fostbrödraskap. It's so similar in Icelandic, fostbroderlag. And this was a custom during the Viking Age, where two men swore their loyalty to each other via a blood oath. This usually happened during a ceremony involving mixing their blood, and it seemed that many times this blood oath between the sworn brothers was even stronger than biological ties to the respective families. That Odin and Loki is blood brothers via this oath is important for the mythology, and it does put the gods in a problematic situation pretty often. Odin is himself related to the giants on his mother's side, and that he chooses to get into a blood oath and a brotherhood with Loki that also is tied to the giants, make the whole Asgard dependent on the giants more than they sometimes was comfortable with. Loki, in the poem Lokasenna, reminds Odin of this brotherhood bond. Remember, Odin, in olden days, that we both our blood have mixed. Then this thou promised, no ale to pour. Maybe this blood oath between Loki and Odin explains why Odin not more often just drive Loki away from Asgard, despite Loki doing all kinds of tricks and puts sometimes the gods in real danger. Hi, kitty. Hi. Loki is a character of mischief and trickery. His position between the gods and the giants puts him as a character that often starts dramatic things between the two, just as it does in the poem Lokasenna that I recently mentioned. In the poem, it is told about a great feast in the halls of Aegir, the great giant that lived in the golden halls under the sea. For once it seems to be peace between giants and gods. Loki, however, gets jealous over the attention that Aegir's two servants gets and kill one of them off. He is driven out of the hall by the other gods, but returns later to pick a fight with them. In the poem, the gods try to calm down his quarrel, but when he is calling out Odin for dressing up as an old lady and do said, "Kitty, you are in the way and I cannot see what I'm supposed to read." Come here, kitty. Oh. Kitty, you are blocking my sight. He is driven out of the hall by the other gods, but return later to pick a fight with them. In the poem, the gods try to calm down his quarrel, but when he is calling out Odin for dressing up as an old lady and do said, accusing Freya of not only sleeping around with others than her husband, but also sleeping with her own brother, and also sent similar accusations to other gods and goddesses, well, the gods had enough. It escalates very quickly, and after Loki sets off Thor's anger so much that Thor is threatening to kill him, Loki flees from the hall again. Loki is common in the mythology poems and is used in many tales as the instigator for trouble. He doesn't seem to have had any official cult though, as we can see with gods like Frey, Odin and Freya. There is no known cult place for Loki, and that also makes him a tricky figure to catch and place within the Old Norse religion. Were he just a mythology character that were more something the Old Norse people told stories about, and that was not seen as an actual god you could ask favors from? Is he some kind of a fire demon or death demon as a follower to Thor, the god of thunder? His name can be connected to the word Loge, and therefore there are theories that he is some kind of fire god or fire demon. But he also shares similarities with other gods that are known as spider gods. In that role, his function is some kind of mediator between gods and giants. Or is he a creation by Snorri Sturlason in Snorri's Edda to represent a devil character? Again, we do not know which one of all these theories are the truth, and as you can hear, the theories around Loki are many. None of these theories are completely taken from space, and they all have valid points. The only one I personally do not agree with is that Loki is created by Snorri. First of all, we do have older poems that do mention Loki, as an example Houselong by Thordolf. That is a poem from the 10th century where Loki plays a big part as getting tricked by a giant called Chatse. So he has to promise to deliver Idun to Chatse with her apples that keeps the gods young and strong. This almost killed the gods, but Loki managed to save the day in the end, as he often actually do. Then we have the poem Lokasenna. The poem Lokasenna is sometimes said to be written down after the Christianity came because people point to the fact that it is very much a mockery of most of the gods. It is a brilliant piece of poem, but I side with the other academics here and say that we have many examples of valid Viking poems and stories that absolutely is not just made up after Christianity, and they also mock the gods. Laughter is a well-known part of the Old Norse religion, and the framing story with all the gods sitting down for a feast and an uninvited guest shows up and stir up some trouble is known way back in time in the whole of Europe. That Snorri could have changed details or made other details stronger to turn Loki to more of an evil character is, however, something that I find fully possible. A female academic called Ann Holtzmark wrote 1962 about how Snorri's wording when he talks about Loki is very similar to how other medieval texts portrayed the devil. Loki had more wisdom than most, but that wisdom came out as cunning and sly. He is also extremely queer, a character that not only changes sex and gives birth, but that is very androgynous and is right out called both unmanly and homosexual by the other gods in Lokasena. We do tend to see Loki as something evil with our Christianity-colored eyes. The myth about how Loki kills Balder has probably something to do with that. There is no other explanation to what Loki does in that story other than that he kills Balder just because he feels like it. But other stories around Loki, very often when he travels together with Thor, he instead comes off as cunning and sly, maybe a bit selfish, but not necessarily evil. He is also playful, intelligent, and full of pretty fun adventures. Another thing that probably interferes with our will to portray him as evil is the fact that Loki has 4 children that all are monsters. 3 of them he has together with a giantess called Angerboda, and that is the Midgard serpent, the Fenris wolf, and Hel, a woman with half her face blue and twisted as death and half her face as a normal woman. 2 of these monsters is said to kill Odin and Thor during Ragnarök, when the world ends. The Midgard serpent is, perhaps just like his father, an ambiguous monster. It is said to kill Thor during Ragnarök, but before that it holds the world together as an Ouroboros, circling around the edges of the world, eating its own tail. Fenris is the huge wolf that the gods have had trouble with since he was a young puppy. He grew too fast, and the gods got scared and decided to chain him up in a cave. Well, in my world, Fenris was a good pupper, and he didn't do any harm except perhaps eat 1 or 2 cows. So if the gods did not chain him up for eternity, he might actually have been on their side when Ragnarök came. But the gods were not fair, and they made this wolf into a monster. So perhaps Odin will deserve it when Ragnarök comes, and Fenris gets loose again and eats him. Just saying. If you treat a dog bad, you will have a bad dog. As a child, I always had a huge problem with this myth and could not understand how the gods could be so evil. But I guess this shows that what is good and evil in the Old Norse is very much up to interpretation. Loki also have a place in the Ragnarök story, where he is said to be the leader of the monsters and the giants against the Aesir led by Odin. When Odin in Lokasena is naming Loki as father of the wolf, it is probably not only said with mockery, it is also said with a bit of respect. Odin knows all. He knows his faith as well as Loki, and he knows Loki is a powerful being that is not to be toyed with. As previously mentioned, Loki is not just evil in the older poems. He is not even all evil in Snorri's poems. He is playful and he is full of mischievous deeds, but they doesn't always seem to come out of a place of evil. Very often Loki is the one saving the gods, and that is how his 4th child comes to be. This is Sleipnir, an 8-legged horse that is the child between Loki and a stallion called Svadelfare. The story is based on the old folk legend theme called the Master Builder legend. This legend have been told about many great buildings, not only in Scandinavia but in other parts of the world too. It is a fascinating myth, so maybe I should do a special episode just about this myth. Comment down below if you want to hear more about this particular myth. And while you're down there, why don't you also hit that subscribe button if you haven't already subscribed, and the bell icon, because the bell icon will tell you when I post something new, and my posting schedule right now is random at best. So back to the tale of Loki and him giving birth to Sleipnir. During a time when Thor was not at home to defend Asgard, a man shows up and asks the gods if they want to have a great wall built between the giants and the gods' lands, a wall that would be impossible to breach for the giants. The price he asks, if he managed to do this just by himself in just 6 months, is the sun, the moon, and Freya as his wife. Since the gods can't ever imagine someone building a wall that big in just 6 months, and they also have realized that with Thor away, they might need some extra protection, they agree. But it then shows that this master builder was a giant himself, and he also had the help of an extremely strong horse named Svadilfare. When the gods realized that this man would actually be able to finish in time, they got nervous. They turned to Loki and claimed that this was his fault because he said that it would be a good idea, and they now demand him to fix it. Loki did so. He turned himself into a mare, and by that he managed to lure away Svadilfare into the woods. The master builder had to realize that he had failed to build what he said he would, and he loses his contract. This made him so mad he tried to tear down the wall again, but by then Thor has come back home and he crushes the giant's skull with his hammer. Loki had to pay a big price though, because he and the stallion resulted in him giving birth to a grey little foal with 8 legs. The horse name was Sleipnir and was given to Odin. This story doesn't just give Loki honor despite him being the one actually saving the gods. Here we touch on a common theme with Loki, and that is one of the queer traits that he often has. In more than one story, Loki either transforms himself from man to woman or man into mare in the last story's case. He also dresses up as a woman. This have caused many stories to accuse him of what is called ergi, and I have a whole video about this and the view of transsexual and homosexual during the Viking Age here on my channel. I would say that many academics too fast come to the conclusion that Loki was actually viewed as ergi during the Viking Age. He is accused of this in Lokasana, but he actually defends himself very well, claiming that he did not do anything wrong because he stayed in character. He transformed himself into a woman properly, unlike Odin, that does Seder but does not transform into a woman, or Thor, that dressed up as a woman to get his hammer back, but did not behave as a woman during the time he was dressed as one. The whole debate around transsexual and homosexual Viking is long, so I will not go into it much here. I instead recommend you to look at my other video that I will put a link to below, and also wait for me to do another video where I will go even deeper into this question. Loki is, however, one of the most prominent characters that do switch between man and a woman, and that does seem pretty confident and relaxed into doing so. The most common conclusion the academic world has around Loki is that of a trickster. Trickster gods and spirits have been known in many different cultures around the world. Almost all of the old religions have one. The trickster is often a comical figure that either puts himself into trouble or put others in trouble and then mocks them. The trickster is also sometimes called the cultural bringer. They are the one that through laughter, erotic actions, and sometimes shameful actions bring the humans new culture things, and they are very often harshly punished for it. They also very often stand between the gods and humans. The list of different trickster gods can be made long. We have Anansi, the African spider god, the Navajo crane spirit Visakijak, sorry if I butchered that also is connected to the coyote in some areas. We have San Wukong, the Chinese monkey king, and Prometheus from the Greek mythology, just to mention a few of a very long list. Loki doesn't seem to bring much to the humans except for the fish net that is created when the other gods try to catch Loki after he has turned himself into a salmon. But it does bring a lot to the gods. He is the one triggering the dwarves into giving him not only goddess Sif's golden hair, but also Thor's hammer Mjolnir, Odin's ring Draupner, Frey's ship that can be folded into his pocket, and many more gifts that had magical properties. He sometimes plays the part of the fool, and is more cunning and witty than others. There is a very comical story about Loki and the giantess Skade. It doesn't start out so comical. Skade comes to Asgard to complain for the Aesir gods that they have killed her father. Skade's father Chatse is the giant that I previously mentioned, where Loki is forced by Chatse to kidnap Idun and her apples for Chatse. When Loki is putting things right again with Idun, Chatse is burned to death by the gods. Skade is his only daughter, and she now comes up in Asgard in full armor, demanding that the gods pay her for her loss, or she will attack them. Her terms to keep the peace with the gods is that she is allowed to choose a god to marry, and that the gods also must make her laugh. The latter proves to not be so easy, but here is where Loki plays the fool and, by that, again saves the days for the gods. He ties a rope to the goat's beard and the other end of that rope around his balls. When the goat starts to jump around, Loki screams and falls face down into Skade's lap. This causes the giantess shield maiden to laugh out loud. As a footnote, Skade then marries Njord, the god of the sea, which doesn't turn out to be such a happy marriage because Skade is from the mountains and loves skiing and hunting, and she can't stand the seagulls' screams and the sound of the water. Njord, on the other hand, cannot stand the sound of the mountains, where wolves howl and the tree whispers. They tried to live half-time in the mountains and half-time by the sea, but while one was happy, the other one was miserable half of the times. Skade will absolutely deserve her own video in the future, so let's go back to Loki again. As I said, he sometimes plays the part of the fool and the tricksters, just as Prometheus from the Greek gods also does. But the punishment he gets is not for giving things to the humans, like with Prometheus that gave the humans fire. It is because he kills Balder, and the gods get revenge. They trap him, just as they trapped one of his children, the Fenris wolf, and just as Fenris, Loki gets tied down in a cave. The story is pretty gory. They kill his son, Narve, that he has with his wife Sigyn, and uses the son's entrails to tie him down with. They then place 2 serpents above his head so that the venom will drip into his eyes. Sigyn is a very faithful wife to Loki. She stays behind him and holds up a bowl to collect the venom. But when the bowl is full and she has to empty it, the venom will get down in Loki's eyes, and then he tear into his bones so harsh that the whole earth shakes. There Loki will stay until Ragnarök happens and he gets free, and together with all the other giants and his monster children, the Midgard serpent and Fenris, he will get revenge for his harsh treatments by the gods and kill them all. So who was Loki? Was he a fire god, a spider god, a pure trickster, or just something to use in a mythology to create some kind of bridge and balance between the 2 worlds of the gods and giants? Well, who knows? Loki seems to trick us today as much as he often tricked the gods. Over the last 1,000 years, we have lost our knowledge of him, and sadly, we are only left with random pieces of the puzzle. Now, I hope you enjoyed this video and that you doesn't get lost in the winter dark during this second month of 2023. Take care and subscribe.